Welcome to the Money Huddle, a podcast that explores financial topics for families and small business owners. Hosted by Michael Baker and Ross Marinell. All opinions expressed by Michael and Ross or any podcast guests are solely their own opinions and may not reflect the opinions of Planners Alliance. The podcast recording is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for investment decisions. Clients of Planners Alliance may maintain positions in securities discussed on the program.
Welcome back to another show of the Money Huddle. My name is Michael Baker, and I'm here with Ross Marinell. Ross, how you doing?
What's going on today, buddy? How we doing?
Doing all right. Just getting ready to dive into this interesting topic you brought to the table today.
So today I have a article I thought was really interesting. This was based on a survey by the TransAmerica Center for Retirement Studies.
Okay.
And the headline of the article is The Financial Struggles of Unplanned Retirement.
Ooh.
So I want to give a little backdrop here.
Okay.
So the TransAmerica Study found that on average, Americans are retiring at age, give me a guess what you think the average retirement age is.
That's not fair because I've studied this stuff. Well, here's what I'll say. Most people, if you ask them about retirement, they tend to say 65, 66 because that's the age that our two big programs kick. Well, that's the age that Medicare kicks in,
right?
And it's also that's usually kind of like
retirement age
where we mentally account for like, hey, retirement, I can get health care, Medicare, so 65.
Right. So I would agree. I think that for many people, they're targeting that sort of mid-60s age range, right, where we think, okay, I can transition from my group employment healthcare plan. So the reality is what this study found is that the average age for retirement is 63. But more than half indicated that they retired sooner than they had planned. So
you're saying the actual average age is around 63, but more than 50% of those surveyed retired earlier than they thought they would? Is that right?
That's correct. So it was an unplanned retirement, meaning either they had a health issue that prevented them from working, or it was some other employment-related issue, so maybe a downsizing, corporate layoffs, companies out of business, whatever the circumstances may be. So this prompted, I thought, an interesting conversation for us to have because we may see that final, let's say 2-3 years of work history. And somebody listening may think, well, how big of a deal is it? Mm-hmm. And I think it's important to talk about. And so one of the things I wanted to kind of get your opinion on was, all right, when we think about unplanned retirement, let's just touch on a few of the things that have to happen, right? Mm-hmm. If you're, let's say at age 63, your goal is to work to 66.
Yep.
All right, so what things start to begin to affect that individual? What are some of the decisions we've got to make? So what are some of the things that you're kind of thinking about, the challenges that might pop up that were really unplanned?
Well, the first thing that kind of pops to mind is just healthcare. I mean, if you work for an employer that provides you with benefits like healthcare, a lot of people tend to be underinsured as far as life insurance goes. And one of the main sources a lot of people have their life insurance is they'll buy protection through group insurance with work. Right. So, a lot of your benefits might be going away. So that's the first thing that kind of pops in my mind.
The first thing I think that popped in my mind too is, okay, so let's say at age 63, you lose your group employment benefit plan, being paid, well, at least the way that you had it before, right? Where your employer was maybe offsetting some of that cost. So the alternative then becomes really quickly, well, do you go on Cobra insurance?
Right. I was thinking Cobra. It's like, so technically you don't lose it. You have the option to go on to Cobra. So we lose the lower cost version of our health insurance.
And so when you're working through your employer, there's a good chance they're paying for
very likely
a potentially sizable chunk of that monthly health insurance.
I think they're
premium.
required to pay it. I believe they're required to pay at minimum 50%.
So what happens then on the Cobra plan is the employer stops paying that portion. You then, as the individual, have the option of continuing that insurance, but you're going to pay a lot larger premium than what you were previously paying in most cases. So
at 60, 62, 63 years old. Yeah.
So it is interesting. Yeah. It's important to know how much your portion is. Of course, we know, if you're seeing your paycheck and you're seeing the health insurance deduction coming, you know what you're paying for your health insurance plan. Right. The question is, do you know what your employer's paying? Because that combination is going to be more closely resembling what the actual Cobra health insurance charge would be. Healthcare was I think the first thing that came into my mind. Yep. And beyond that, then the alternatives would be, well, you could go on to the Affordable Care Act. Mm-hmm. You can't be discriminated against for
no, you have coverage.
Conditions. You're going to have coverage. Then again, it just becomes weighing the cost and then the benefits of it. So we kind of touched on healthcare a little bit. So what were some other challenges then that you might?
Well, one of the things that I know a lot of people seem to focus on as they're finishing up, the last few years before a planned retirement date is a lot of folks get hyper focused on paying off debt, and because they want to retire debt free. So they're focused on accelerating a mortgage payoff, or if they're okay with their mortgage, but they've got some lingering credit card debt. Perhaps we've talked about in other episodes, they co-signed a student loan and they want to get that loan paid off, or maybe they even have a loan, so or get their cars paid off, anything like that. So I would say probably the biggest thing that comes into mind is they have expenses that they weren't expecting to have when they retired, because they were planning to be finished with them.
Right. So it could have been some accelerated debt payments that now are going to be lingering. Correct. So maybe you can't get the auto loan paid off before you retire, but that was your goal. Mm-hmm. So the other thing I really thought healthcare, and then the second one was obviously you're losing your wages at a point where you may be making some sizable contributions to your retirement plans.
Yeah, you can't save anymore.
Yeah. So
most likely.
If you were in a 401k plan, for example, and you were maximizing your contributions, it's possible you were making up to a $19,000 contribution this year for your 2019 contribution
plus
limit
a match. 401k,
plus a match, plus your $6,000 makeup contribution if you're over age 50. And so
that's a big chunk.
It's a big chunk. And if the goal was in those last several years of work to maximize that 401k benefit, it's your potential peak earning years. Mm-hmm. Knowing that you're going to have, let's say you're 3 years away, that's could be $75,000 in missed 401k contributions, not to mention just the lost wages of not having the job and the income that comes along with it.
No, I'm with you. Next thing that would come to mind for me is a lot of people, if we're talking 62 plus, we're already hit that 62 age where Social Security, they're now eligible for Social Security. That becomes a big focus, because obviously if you're working, you're not going to, most likely if you're working, you're not going to claim your Social Security benefit, because even if you did, the earnings test is going to apply. It's going to suspend away those payments, but you lose your job. All of a sudden, like you said, you lose your income. You now I have this income stream that's ready, even though you had never planned. So do you claim Social Security early? How do you navigate that? That would become something.
Exactly. So let's take this individual, our hypothetical individual that's planning to work to 66. Let's just assume that's their full retirement age benefit. Mm-hmm. Now at 62, they get the unfortunate news that they've lost their job.
Yeah.
And if they can't readily find another job, or they can't find a job that they're satisfied with, then it begins, okay, well, what do we do to replace that lost income? And I think it naturally, thought of, all right, well, if our goal was originally to claim Social Security at 66, mm-hmm. and let's say we have a $2,000 benefit, okay. $2,000 monthly Social Security benefit at 4 retirement.
So $24,000.
Right, so $24,000 a year. That's if you were to claim, let's say, the full retirement age is 66. But if you claim it at 62, you lose 25% of that.
Oh, yeah.
So your monthly income is going to go down. And then that income that you were expecting to have at your full retirement age
is gone.
Is now $500 less.
Right.
And so that pull ahead cost, there is a cost associated with that, right? And it's getting that lower monthly benefit.
Sure. No, and I mean, and I think at least with us, I mean, we focus specifically on Social Security when it comes to planning for retirement. How do we want to utilize it? When specifically do we want to claim? Do we have an actual start date, or do we have a kind of a range of time periods where we're going to consider, does it make sense to claim? So I think what I would hope could be avoided for anyone that's dealing with that is the emotional reaction. I think sometimes it's like, oh, I better do something, and I better do something now. What can I do? Oh, I'm going to claim Social Security because I can immediately start this. And, we've heard stories in the past where people, they had an event, they unexpectedly, they were downsized, immediately went and claimed their Social Security because they knew they could turn that on. But 3 months later, they found themselves having another job.
Right.
And they're asking us like, can I stop that Social Security payment, or, what happens because I'm getting hit with the earnings test and all these other questions.
It is. And I think there's an emotional toll that it takes too, because you're seeing, that individual knows, all right, there's light at the end of the tunnel. I'm only a few years away from my retirement goal. And then to have the rug pulled out from under you, whether it's a health issue that it literally just, you can't go back to work in the capacity that you were, or you lose your job and you have to start over. For some folks, that may be the first time in their life that they haven't had a job.
Yeah.
And there is an
especially with that, that baby boomer generation. Right. A lot of those folks, they worked in high school and they have never not had a job.
It literally may be the first extended period where they don't have a reliable employment when they want it.
Right.
And so it's tough, sometimes. So we think about pulling ahead Social Security maybe, but the other thing is too, it's like, all right, do you file for unemployment?
Yeah.
Because the reality is you if you're actively seeking a job and you've lost yours, you probably deserve it. And that's what it's there for.
Well,
but it's an emotional hurdle that people just have to get over, because at that point it's, if it's an all hands on deck situation where we really need all the income we can, it's maybe something you have to do.
I used to have, probably a little, I don't know, being self-employed for forever, I've never really understood all the ins and outs of the unemployment. It really kind of came to the focus for me a lot during the financial crisis, because you had millions of people on unemployment. The Obama administration, they just kept extending it and kept extending it and kept extending it. And, having brought on some clients during that time period where you hear like how they were downsized. Sometimes just flat out, like they came to work, didn't even have a clue, and it was pack your things, your job is no longer here. Right. Just so listening through some of those stories, I've kind of lost any shame, like as it relates to filing for unemployment. I'm like, we pay for that. You pay for that out of your the companies, they pay for that insurance. And it's like, if something to me, if you get hit like that and you're eligible, go and file. Go and file. That benefit's paid for. That's what it's there for. There's no shame in that. Hey, if you get another job, wonderful. But until then, let's use it. Right.
I agree 100%. Don't be too proud to take advantage of the resources and benefits that are there.
Right.
And that's and I think a very clear reason, of why you need it.
Right.
So the other issue, of course, then is if you're unable to find a new employment before your planned retirement date,
mm-hmm.
and you're looking at Social Security, you may also then be looking at, do I start to take early withdrawals from retirement savings?
Yeah. And then if you're looking at a portfolio that's getting ready to have to be a distribution portfolio several years ahead of when you were planning for it to be, then that's when you start thinking about like how big of an impact could whatever the market's doing at that period of time, how does that impact your retirement?
And not only that, but just imagine, if you're going through a market downturn with the emotional toll of
mm-hmm.
having lost a job and losing income, you're already at a high stress level. Can you keep a clear head on in investing through a down market cycle?
I think it's extremely hard
that would be a lot to
for
ask.
Most people. I think it takes a special mindset to be able to not have emotions impacting your decisions at that point in time.
I agree. So let's talk
So what else do they got in that study?
So, they highlight a few folk stories.
Mm-hmm.
I do think, I'm actually looking here at, this is the TransAmerica Center for Retirement Studies survey was also part of a Fox Business article, a personal finance article called "The Financial Struggles of Unplanned Retirement."
Okay.
They illustrated a few people's stories, which I thought were really kind of touching and kind of hit a nerve with us. Being a retirement planning firm. We focus a lot of our attention on preparing people for retirement.
Right.
So some of the issues that have come up, having to look at healthcare before you're ready, having to look at Social Security, we've kind of experienced this alongside some of the people that we work with. So we have a personal connection to this story. I thought it was really something that was important to highlight on our Money Huddle podcast, because it's happening more often than we think. If half the people are retiring earlier than they planned, this is so common that I think this needs to be more front and center than it is.
I agree. I think, I think what it really highlights to me is the importance of, having a plan and getting a plan in place and starting now, right? So like a lot of our peers, like 30s, 40s, having young families, don't discount putting some financial plans in place about how you're going to be intentional with your saving, how you're going to be intentional with preparing and planning for college, because life could change. But I have found in working with our clients that it is so much easier to adjust and adapt a flexible plan than it is when you have no plan and then life just happens and now you got to figure it out because you're stressed, your mind is cloudy, and you kind of take this whack-a-mole mentality. You're like, okay, what's the biggest thing we got to tackle right now? Versus when you have a plan, you're like, okay, well let's look at where we are, let's figure out what our options are, and let's determine of the paths forward that we see which one makes the most sense right now.
Right. And we instinctively have a immediate reaction to that type of environment.
Sure.
So maybe it is, all right, that's it. I'm going to liquidate savings. I'm going to pay off this bill. I can't have a mortgage.
Oh, immediately.
Or
right.
you just never know where your mind's going to jump to until you're in that situation, and it is painful. And to see, like you said, you have a short time horizon. You just, more than anything, just work those last 2 or 3 years in a comfortable place. Do what you love to do at your job, and then to have that kind of pulled out from under you, it really does create a painful emotional experience. And so I always look, sometimes we'll be talking with people and say, well, I'm not retired yet. And it's like, hey, that's okay. We should be sitting down 5 years in advance, at least.
Yeah.
For a comprehensive retirement
Jinx
income plan. Right. But I'm not just talking about, there's folks that get some really good financial planning done beyond that. I mean, earlier than that, but I'm thinking, all right, identifying income sources, being really deliberate about where is the income going to come from, how much can it produce, and start to come up with some contingencies that, okay, what if we can't hit all of the goals of debt reduction before retirement, then what? And create some variables so that if the situation does pop up, there's some alternatives to fall back on.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think I can't, again, overemphasize enough, and it doesn't have to be, that's the thing, it doesn't have to be complicated. I think, I met with a client the other week, and this was actually the analogy he gave me. He's a male, and is about to be 50. And he's thinking, hey, I gotta go do the things that guys have to do. Got to go, to the urologist and do all these fun things, just like the ladies have not so fun things that they have to do health wise. And he's like, I never even thought about it. He goes, but like just driving over here, he's like, I started to get nervous. He's like, because, I don't know what I don't know, and what if I go and Michael tells me, oh, it's not going to be good, and so I think sometimes people get this, they build up this thing in their head, like, oh, like coming over here is going to be an unpleasant experience. And first of all, we do everything in our power to not make it unpleasant. We try to make it a relaxing environment. We like to relax and enjoy what we do, but sometimes we get in our own way, and that's how like weeks become months become years of not dealing with it. And we think that it's just go ahead and get started, and just wherever you are, even if it's just with all you've got right now is your 401k and some term life insurance, but you don't want to work forever. You've got some small kids. or teenagers, go ahead and try to get started with some type of plan because, as this study I think highlights is like sometimes life can just happen to you.
Right. And so just remember, we'll kind of end it here. There's a 50% chance that you may retire on an unplanned date.
Yeah.
But there's a 100% chance you can be ready for it.
Well, I think that's true. And just to expound add one more little thought is, I know that I've had multiple conversations over the last several years with people that this happened to them. Their job either was getting relocated and they were like not leaving because the grandkids were here or family was here, or for whatever their reasoning, it's like, hey, this has happened. And we've had the conversation about a phased retirement, or, hey, look, you don't need to go back working high stress, 6-figure a year job. I mean, hey, if you go find something that you just like doing and you can make $40,000 a year doing it for another few years, you're going to be fine because you've got the planning in place.
Hey, that's a great point. We've seen people really embrace that change and say, okay, well, this corporate career path is maybe over.
It's done.
But it gives me some time to really think about what I want to do next.
Sure.
And we've kind of watched people go in a completely different direction and be thrilled.
Yeah.
And yeah, maybe they're not in the corporate office making this high 6-figure salary, but they are happy and they're doing enough income to keep their retirement plan on track.
Well, I think part of that too, and is just like you said, when things happen, we're at an emotional state, and it's hard. It's really hard to like clear out some of those weeds to think, where am I going to be 12 months from now? Where am I going to be 2 years from now? And I mean, think about this. I mean, if you're married, right, and in our business, 62 years old is young.
Right.
It's like, our clients always laugh when we like, oh, God, you guys are young. And they look at us like, what are you talking about, young? But 62 is so young now. And so, if you're in good health, tons of energy, very active, wanting to go and do things, but, your spouse still works and is still planning to work. They're now the main breadwinner or sole breadwinner. I think what could happen very easily is the idea of, oh, I'm retired, semi-retired is so attractive because it's marketed so heavily, like retirement. Oh, go run on the sandy beaches. I think a lot of people get bored, and then you have some things that you would be excited about doing or trying, but you never had time before or didn't think you could fit it in. And I think now, like, hey man, this is the time to like go see if you really want to do that.
Right.
Go try to do something, that you'd be passionate about. See if you can earn a little money doing it.
So I think that's some great points.
Yeah.
And certainly just to kind of recap, I mean, obviously it's a tough, painful time to lose a job so close to your planned retirement. You're missing out on wages that you were expecting to have, potential retirement contributions that you need, that you want to be able to build your retirement nest egg a little higher so that you have a little extra to withdraw from.
What as we wrap up here, so you read the study, like what would be your one piece of guidance to anyone that this has happened to or could happen in the future? What would be like, okay, this has happened, now what do I do?
All right, so I don't know if there's one. I'll say a couple of things.
Okay.
One is this is where having someone that you can rely on to talk through the decision-making process. This is really about just making level-headed,
objective
calm,
third party,
objective decisions where you don't want to have a knee-jerk reaction and start something that you can't stop, right? Unwind something. So make a big withdrawal from a 401k and it's gone, and now there's a taxable limit. Yeah, I think part of it is just having a couple of people that you can rely on to make good decisions. I'll tell you something I thought was really interesting. So I heard this story from some people that I know that a few years before this couple actually retired and launched into a planned retirement, they started living on their future, what they calculated their retirement income to be.
They did a test run.
And they did it far enough out that they were really seeing, can we do everything we want to do on this level of income? What cutbacks do we have to make?
Right.
How do we have to alter, our lifestyle? And they found it was tough. It was close, right, for this particular couple. But they ended up saving a pretty significant amount of money because they were living on less than they had been for, a good chunk of their life. It was a nice test run to see, all right, are we ready to have this type of retirement income be the top line? And I thought that was a really interesting way to kind of approach it.
No, it is. And, one thing that I think people can do today, this is something that can be done today as far as planning. I mean, obviously, you start looking, 10 years, 15 years in the future, you have to do some hypotheticals, but it's looking at your savings rate, looking what, anticipated, growth on your assets. What kind of income could that look like? I mean, like if you're 40, right? Mm-hmm. I've had young people come in here and say, well, I'd love to retire at 60. And I'm sitting here thinking like, man, do you really know what that balance sheet probably needs to look like? I mean, because really one of two things need to happen. Either you need to have the assets, or you need to be able to live on a constrained, income source. So I think this is great. It's a great topic that definitely needs to be highlighted more because, you don't want to be, I think the main idea here is you don't want to be thrust in a situation where you got to figure life out because, something happened and you weren't prepared.
On the fly and on your own. It's a tough place to be.
Right. Awesome. Good study. Thank y'all for listening, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We'll see you next time.